Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Goss, former president of the Astronomical League. This program is one of a series of programs that we're producing to help celebrate the 75th anniversary of the League, which was founded on November 15th, 1946. At that time, the League had under 1,500 members. Today, 75 years later, we're just approaching 19,000 members spread across the United States, with many of them being international members. The League offers many observing programs to enhance your experience under the stars, to encourage you to get out and look at the sky, see what it has to offer, and make your time much more enjoyable and rewarding. Today, we're lucky to have with us Brad Young, creator and coordinator of the Alternate Constellations program, a new program that the League is offering, one that encourages you to look at the sky in a whole new, different way, in a whole new multicultural way. So without saying any more, I'd like to turn it over to Brad so he can tell you all about this interesting and new way of looking at the sky. Brad?
Start off by thanking the AL for letting me do this to kind of promote this program and hopefully encourage people to do it and to enjoy looking at the night sky in a little bit different way. And we'll go on to the next slide here. Okay, so just a matter of some short introductions. I am the program coordinator and presenter today, Brad Young. I'm a platinum observer with the Astronomical League. This is the first program that I developed that was accepted by the League. I worked on a few others, but there were a couple of them where there was somebody else that was already further along and just some other things. So I'm glad this one was accepted. I'm real excited about it, and hopefully it will encourage people for years to come. What I'd like to do, we do have a few people attending live today, and if any of you would like to introduce yourself, if you've done the program or if you're doing it or if you haven't started it yet, have any comments or questions, I'll leave that up to the audience. Anyone wanted to chime in?
This is Mike Hoska from Colorado. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. I'm a platinum observer, also done a few of these Astronomical League programs myself, and I'm about 3/4 of the way done with this alternate constellation observing program. And what I'm finding that I like the best about it is the change of pace from looking at deep sky objects just to, trying to find these asterisms and then record them and then think back on how faint these guys really are. And back in the days when these ancient cultures made these constellations, they had no light pollution. So these stars were probably bright beacons. But in today's world, they're fairly dim and a challenge to find, but they're fun to find.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Anyone else?
This is Chuck Allen. I completed the program I think last October. And my experience with it is that if you can imagine yourself conducting a public observation where perhaps you're pointing out constellations to the public, the ability to look at Orion and talk about the mythology behind Orion is one thing, but the ability to add something to that by pointing out the 3 belt stars, for example, and Betelgeuse and Rigel, and imagining the Aboriginal cultures in Australia and being able to explain that in that culture, they saw that as a canoe with 3 buoys in it, with a fishing line leading down to the Orion Nebula, the sword stars, if you will, of Orion, that were the fishing line leading to a forbidden fish that the boys had caught in violation of tribal laws. And because of this, these buoys were cast into the sky as a warning to other boys to honor tribal laws. You add that to your public discussion of teaching constellations, and people are fascinated. And it shows a lot of depth of understanding on your part as well. So this program is really fantastic. I've been giving programs on alternate constellations for years. And so when this came along, I was extremely pleased. And it's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot for the comment. Anyone else?
Yeah, Brad. This is Rob Rutkowski out here in Hawaii.
Hey, how's it going?
As Mike Hoska said, that is the change of pace. If you're into deep observing and working on programs, this was a real change. It was great. It was fun. It was a challenge to find the information. And I've encouraged a lot of our members to do this, and they will be doing this. But yes, it's a great program. I had a lot of fun, as you know, in our conversations. This was a kick. It made me search, it made me look, it made me try to think what it was like way back when. So yes, thank you.
Great. You're welcome. And yeah, anyone else have any comments?
I'd like to echo what was said by Chuck and the last speaker. Researching it, you always learn more than what you go out to look for. And I enjoyed trying to hunt down either on the internet or have a local library get some books for me and read about the various cultures. So it was kind of a mind expanding. So I appreciated the effort in putting that together.
Good deal. Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, we'll move on. And I'd just like to say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just ask the question, or if you have another comment or anything like that. We don't need to be rigid here, so just jump on in. Sort of the short version of the mission statement I referred to, and sort of an explanation of what's going on, is the program is sort of in two parts, plus a little bit more. The first part is looking at obsolete constellations that are Eurocentric. In other words, there are some constellations that the sort of the Western area of the world used in times past, but they've been discarded along the way. The point of the first part of the program is to encourage observing and learning about those groups. And one of the things about them is and I think Mike alluded to this a little bit, many of these groups fill in the blanks in the sky. We have a deteriorated view of the naked eye night sky now. If you've ever been to a really dark site, you know that there's a whole lot of other stars out there that we don't usually see. And these constellations were typically late medieval, Renaissance into the 17 or 1800s period to kind of fill up those areas. The second part of it is constellations of other cultures. This is a little bit different. It talks about seeing constellations through the eyes of people all over the world and throughout history. And often these constellations are familiar to us. They're not like the obsolete ones that may be a stretch, you may have heard a little bit about before or never heard of. Most of these groupings you'll know, but you won't know them this way because they're based on the mythology and the astronomy of other cultures or other times or both, all over the world. And what I found interesting about it was, comparing showpiece items like Orion or the Pleiades, or the three stars in the belt, as we just heard, as seen by others in a different place, a different culture. And then at the end of it, there's just a few additional exercises that are really, you can do part of them outdoors if you want. One of them is your favorite constellation, so you might want to revisit it. But it's more inclined to inside work, looking at maybe a planetarium or a planetarium program, I should say, or some other ways of doing these exercises. Okay. The development, just a real short explanation of how this happened. At the 2019 Okie-Tech Star Party, there was a talk given, and I probably should have looked up her name. Mike, you don't happen to remember who it was, do you?
No, I don't. Maybe Kathy Machen.
Oh, yeah, Kathy Machen. Yes, that was who it was. Kathy Machen. You're right. Thank you for that. Yeah, she gave a talk on sort of a general, sales pitch for all of the programs. It was a real good talk, but it did get some people during the Q&A part of it. It got some people giving some feedback. And part of the feedback was that a lot of the programs had gone to dim objects that required, large telescopes or expensive equipment. They were difficult to do in the city. Some of these folks are, full-time employed, they have children, they have family concerns and all kinds of things going on. And they really don't have time to look at, 400 Herschel objects or something like that. There was some feedback about doing some more beginner level programs that you could do with limited equipment and limited time. And not necessarily that you didn't put in the work, but just that you didn't have to, travel to a dark sky site and bring your 20-inch telescope with you to do them. I first developed the Obsolete Constellations, and to be honest with you, I agree with the feedback I got from the AL. It didn't really give you a full program. It was kind of an interesting start, but it didn't have the oomph that it needed. So then I suggested looking at other cultures, and that really struck a note with some folks. I think they, like Al mentioned, there's been some, I think it was Al, there's been some other folks that have done, presentations about other cultures. And it's something that's out there that needs to be addressed. I think it's interesting and people have talked about it, but I didn't see anything where you really were doing it, where you were looking at the stars and looking at the literature and looking to see how all this meshes together. Not to say that there aren't any out there, but there wasn't one as an AL program. So I put that together, and that fulfilled the requirements. And I think it really introduced a different perspective. We've already heard some comments about, that people have enjoyed looking into the mythology of other cultures and other parts of the world and how that looks in the sky. Okay, so the first part is the obsolete constellations. And just a point here, I chose not to include any pictures or anything. A lot of times with presentations like this, you'll show what you're supposed to look at. And I don't think that's really good for this program, at least for this presentation, because part of the fun of it is to look them up and find, what is that, where is that, and that sort of thing. But so you're not going to see anything directly showing you what to look at in this presentation. That's part of doing the program. The obsolete constellations were all discarded after the IAU, which is the International Astronomical Union, officially set the 88 constellations in 1930 and gave them their boundaries and everything. So I've got 47 in the checklist. There's plenty more than that, but there were a lot of little constellations that were discarded officially. But many of them are well-known asterisms, such as Equinoxes Bull. There's another one shown on the screen there that you can probably figure out what that is. And the others that weren't just discarded were incorporated into the limits of, or all of them were incorporated in the limits of one of the constellations, and some of them were actually incorporated into the constellation. But that gets off into several divergent paths there. And the last point there is then there are the other ones. There's some of these that are difficult to understand how they got there, I guess would be one way of putting it. A lot of times there were constellations that were put into the sky to honor the guy that was paying the bills, whether it was the king or the Duke of such and such. If somebody was giving money to the astronomer to be his official astronomer, then he might name a little group after that king or whatever. So there's some of those, and a lot of those tend to be very difficult to imagine, but that's the story there. The other part is other cultures. Many cultures see the Big Dipper and Pleiades as special groups with different stories about them. I didn't want to give anything away, but you can look at even some of our brands today will have astronomical references to them. Subaru, the car, has the Pleiades as a brand identifier, and I don't know exactly how to say it, but I think it's Beidou navigation system, which is basically China's GPS system, has the Big Dipper as its symbol. Iridium, if anybody remembers the Iridium phones back in the 90s, they had the Big Dipper as their symbol too. Obviously, though, that's an American company, so it's not quite the same. But there's a lot of examples, even in modern day, of other cultures that have used these groups. They still show up. An overview of the program, and I won't go through this in detail because it's all on the website, and you can see that picture of the website over on the left. It's in there with all the other observing programs. Basically, you just go to the Astronomical League program landing page, and there'll be a observe tab, and you go to the observation programs, and it's there. A quick view of the requirements, so just a few highlights here. It is primarily for eyes or small binoculars. It's a manual. I wouldn't care if you somehow use a device-aided instrument, but I don't really think that's necessary. It's intended to be a beginner level program. So bear that in mind as you decide whether or not to do the program. It's not, I wouldn't say it's challenging as far as observation goes. But the only thing that's proven to be a little challenging, and we'll get into this in a minute, is resources to find the program, or to identify the asterisms and constellations you need to look at. There is an observing form on the website that you can use. It's kind of adapted one that's been out there forever. You can use your own if you want to, and some people have used their own, and it's been perfectly fine with me. There are some requirements. You need to, as usual, you need to give things like your name and the date and the time and all that. But that's pretty vanilla. I think everybody's used to all that. As we get into the checklist, there are checklists available for you to download on the website. If you want to use that, you don't have to. You can do it however you want to. But for instance, for the Obsolete Constellations checklist, there's 47 listed. In order to complete the program, you need to select 40 of them and sketch them. And that has been a little bit of a misunderstanding here and there. I think there were some folks that didn't realize that you needed to sketch them. But they did. They went back and did it. But it is important that you do that you actually look at the group and sketch them as you see them. All of the obsolete constellations have sources in the public domain. First place to go is Wikipedia. You'll find just about everything you need right there. I'll tell you that. Finding resources for these is not difficult, but be sure and include some kind of a attributed copy of your source, whether that's a screenshot or a URL, or just type it out, however you want to do it. I'm not real picky about that, as long as I can figure out that you got it from a source that's reasonable. And then just a short note, there are some of them that are a little difficult to see, maybe if you're very far north, or if we have any international observers, if they're very far south. I'm sorry, I got that. If you're north and the constellation south, that could be difficult, or vice versa. So if there's any geographical problems, just let me know and we can work that out. No big deal. And just in general, if you run into any difficulties doing this program, I would love to hear that. I'd love to hear, from you and try to help you and whatever I can do to make it easier. The second part is Constellation of Other Cultures checklist. And here you have a little bit more work to do as far as resourcing goes. For one thing, for each constellation that you choose and use, you'll need to answer 5 questions. And the 5 questions are there. Does the pattern resemble any modern asterism or official constellation? If so, did the culture you're doing right now have a similar mythology or not? If yes, describe any differences in structure. So let's take as an example the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is pretty famous amongst many cultures over all of recorded history. It's been used to describe different stories forever. And so you're going to find lots of versions of that. They're not all the same, obviously. The story changes. Even today, the Big Dipper is called the Plough in some British areas, and we call it the Big Dipper. But you know, there's other cultures that call it something else, and they didn't use the Big Dipper as we see it. They used part of it, or it and some other stars. There's a variety of things that happened with it. Another question is, was this star group influenced by older or adjacent cultures? You know, did the Akkadians have a version of it that the Iranians, you know, or Persians used later, as an example? And was the star group significant for, you know, determining the calendar, planting a crop, or social events like a big, you know, get together, or some kind of summer festival or whatever, that sort of thing? And again, you don't have to be, it doesn't need to be a little book on each one of these, but just it primarily is intended to help you get more out of the program, to kind of get you thinking about how these are all different but the same in some ways. The other cultures, groups, and requirements here, it's broken up into several groups to kind of cover all the world essentially. And you see there that, for instance, for Native American star groups, you have to do 20 of them. The different groups have different requirements. The reason Native American has the most is because obviously that's pretty, it's prevalent in what we can, you know, get to as far as resources go. I live in Oklahoma. My daughter's a Cherokee. You know, I guess it kind of gives a personal slant to it. I've always been interested in Native American astronomy, so there's a lot of them to look at. But very quickly into the program, some of the folks gave me some feedback that led to this. You know, there are some constellations that are listed in the other cultures checklist that are difficult to find resources on, or you can find resources on them, but they're conflicting. As we go further back in time, you usually get as many definitions of an ancient group as you have people defining them. So it can get confusing very quickly. So what that led to was, you can use any group you find and can get a good resource on, as long as it's geographically in the same area. So for instance, if you have, and I gave away the fact that Tay is very difficult to do resourcing on. You know, you can use another constellation from any culture that's considered Asian. I mean, if it's in Asia, you can use it anywhere from, you know, the tip of Russia to India, where any point in between. So that's just there to make sure that we don't get bogged down with looking at specific things that may be difficult, but you still have to try to cover all of the cultures that are here. The additional exercises are, some of these are things you've probably seen before. Do you have a favorite star group that's not an official constellation? you know, maybe you see, like I have a friend here in the club that he identified a constellation, and everybody, you know, sees it too now. You know, it was the elephant that he sees in, oh, it's sort of in Cassiopeia, pretty big, you know, a lot of naked eye stars. But anyway, if you have one of those, it's not an official constellation, you know, just draw it and explain why you like it. Another one that you probably have heard or maybe done before is, where would the sun be from other stars? Where would it appear in the sky from there, and how would that affect the constellations as seen from other places? And then the other one, the last one, is the effect of the precession of the equinoxes. If you look back, some of these constellations were originated thousands of years ago when the equinoxes were at a different location. That affects how the stars look in the sky, and the exercise gets into all the details of that. This is a picture of the pen that you'll get when you complete the program. Some people thought that it was the sickle of Leo. It does resemble it, but it actually isn't the sickle of Leo. It is a constellation used by the Polynesians, and it consists of everything from Capella down to Canopus or Canopus. Very big constellation, but it helped them, it guided them over the oceans. And so that's what the pen is. It's not the sickle, but it is an example of another culture's view of the stars and how they used them. And finally, what can you get out of the program? Hopefully, the intent of the program is A, to get you out there observing stars. B, it's to help you or guide you to looking at them in other ways. If you do the Constellation Observer program, both north and south, or just north, whichever, it's sort of an adjunct to that. It kind of fills in the holes with the obsolete constellations, but then it tries to take it a step further into the other cultures portion so that you can look at that aspect of it too. So there's the fill in the gaps part, and then there's sort of the fill in the history part and fill in the non-Eurocentric viewpoint. Hopefully that's what you get out of this. I don't think you're going to be overwhelmed with some of the views that you have here. Some of these are pretty faint, kind of hard to figure out what they were seeing, except for some of the other culture stuff. But hopefully it will still encourage you and, again, get you out looking at the stars and involved in astronomy. I know you probably can't write all these down real quick, but there are a lot of resources online for both the obsolete constellations and also the other constellations. There's that link to the mission statement again. There are a lot of resources on the internet. There are also, as someone mentioned earlier, several books. My intent with this program was to do it all with either online free resources or books that I could get at my local library. And I did do that. And a lot of these things are listed here. So it isn't a matter of needing to go out and buy a new book or, you know, do anything spectacular. The only thing I would caution you on is, you know, just be careful with your resources. Make sure that they're something we can trust. Like I said, there's a lot of, especially as you get into the older constellations of other cultures, there's a lot of differing opinions, and you kind of have to decide for yourself which one you believe the most. I'm not going to bust anybody if they use one that's, you know, maybe a little older and then the thinking has changed. It's not a matter of trying to catch you at something. It's just a matter of making sure that you get the best information and you learn the best information while you're doing the program. So, and that was all I had. If anyone has any questions.
Brad, this is John Goss. I want to thank you for presenting that. One aspect you were talking about was the I guess the challenge of doing this. I know the challenge isn't like doing trying to find the dimmest of the dim of deep sky objects, but
Right.
there is a certain challenge of trying to see what other cultures saw in the sky. But I think what's even more important is that how rewarding this can be. You know, you come away with a much better perspective of all the different cultures on Earth and how they saw things. And you know, I'm certainly very ignorant of a lot of this stuff. I know about the plow and the Big Dipper, but you know, I that's about the limit as far as my multiculturalism in the sky. And oh, I also want to commend you on designing a very interesting pin. You know, you're right.
Oh,
You look at that and you think, oh, that's an easy one. That's the sickle. No, no, you're not thinking multiculturally on this one. That was great. That's a good idea
yeah.
on that, Brad.
I will admit it was a little bit of a trick. You know, I knew that people would look at that and think, "Oh, that's just a sickle. What's that? What's so different about that?" And so I fully admit there was a hidden agenda there.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's sort of the whole point of this program is to get you thinking differently there.
yeah,
Good idea.
hopefully, yeah.
We had up to 9 people, I believe, and I want to thank them for joining in. Bradley, thank you for your comments. Same with you, Chuck. Everybody else who I really don't know, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you someplace again in cyberspace. Night.
Uh,
Thanks.